Yeah, I don't know what more to say. Thanks very much for the introduction. Uh, yeah, the Hampshire College program, it's been running for, I want to say 50 years now in Amherst, Massachusetts. It's geared for talented high school students. So that's where I picked up the trade of teaching, and I've taken it with me to Boston College, where I teach undergraduates, graduate students, and so forth. And I know Dave through our shared research interests. We've overlapped at many conferences, and I've yet to make my first trip out to the Navajo Nation. So sorry, I'm not able to meet you all in person, but I hope we can do that at some point in the right place. Are we going to continue to do introductions, Dave, or leap into the activity? Well, we could jump right in. Okay, I got at least one pair of thumbs up. Sure. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hope able to do that. There we go. Can we see that? Okay. Okay, great. And you let me know at any point if there's some difficulty hearing me or seeing what I'm writing or what I'm trying to explain. I wanted to introduce a really interesting concept for adding fractions that leads to a famous unsolved problem that's been unsolved for over 100 years, which I just recently learned about, and I just think is fascinating that we don't know the answer. But to begin, I wanted to introduce a very interesting method for adding fractions, which goes against your, which is the method for adding fractions your students would come up with if they weren't given better instruction. And we'll see where that leads. And then I wanted to steer us into an activity to play around with that method and to look at some questions, explore some questions together. So I think Dave will manage our breaking up into different breakout rooms. And then we'll reconvene and compare what we found and segue into this open problem. So here, away we go. So here's a method for adding fractions. So suppose I had a pair of fractions, 3/5, and I'll just make up another one, 4/7, let's say. And I wanted to add those together. You know, of course, what I need to do is multiply the denominators together and then multiply these cross terms, 3 times 7 plus 4 times 5, and I get an answer, which is 41 over 35. Great. But if you were to put this down, these numbers down, in front of a lazy mathematician, the way that the lazy mathematician might think to add these is just to add the numerators together, 3 plus 4, which is 7, and 5 plus 7, which is 12. And that's how we're going to be adding fractions today. But to distinguish it from normal addition, I'll introduce a special notation. So the notation is if I have two fractions that I want to add together this way, I'm just going to put a bar between them. And the output is going to be put into a little region down below. So if I wanted to erase everything for no apparent reason and put it back, I could do that. If I wanted to clean up my work a little bit, I could take my answer, move it over, and center it. And having enjoyed that so much, I could do it again. if I wanted to take, say, 3/5 and 7/12 and add them together in this funny way, I'd make a little opening for my answer to appear. I add 3 and 7, the numerators, I get 10. I add 5 and 12, I get my favorite number, 17, as the denominator. And I could just go off to the races and keep doing this. 17 over 29. 1729 is a fairly interesting number. And I could go off on other branches. 11 over 19. 15 over 26, and so forth and so on. Did I make a mistake? Are there any questions at this point what the name of the game is? If you like to think in kind of algebraic terms, the formula that I'm doing is I'm taking a fraction of two numbers, a and b, and a fraction of two numbers, c and d. And in my notation, I'm forming a new region and a new fraction, a plus c over b plus d. So this is the golden rule, expressed algebraically. Okay, so that's the method for adding fractions. And I want to start this process of adding from two very simple fractions. This is where our activity will begin. Let's begin with two very simple fractions. The arguably simplest fractions. The number 0, 0 over 1. And while we're breaking rules today, I'll make another fraction, 1 over 0. I know it's horrifying. And I can begin to add these together. And I'll get 1 over 1. And I could add 1 over 0 and 1 over 1 and get 2 over 1. And I could add 1 over 0 and 2 over 1 and get 3 over 1. And I could continue. And you're probably able to guess what pattern's going to develop if I keep adding, going off kind of in a clockwise direction around 1 over 0. I could start this going the other way around and get 1 over 2. I add 1 over 2 to 0 over 1. I get 1 over 3. And there's another pattern that's beginning to develop. But if you go deeper down into the belly of this page, more interesting fractions begin to appear. 8 over 5, 5 over 8, and so forth and so on. If you're trying to work strategically, you'll see, I mean, a lot of numbers are going to develop and you need a big sheet of paper to write everything out. But you could imagine continuing to populate the page if you had a really fine writing implement with all of these fraction additions with numbers put into a bunch of different regions. And what I'm developing right now is the tree from the title. And this tree is the organizing template for all of these numbers, these fractions. So this is the game. This is to begin with two simple fractions to generate this infinite tree whose regions are filled in with fractions that are made in this special way. So here's the exercise I'd like to suggest. We attempt in some breakout rooms. Is go ahead and build out this tree a little bit. Build out this tree of numbers. And the overarching question is, what patterns do you spot, if any? There's a lot to discover in it. And that's the main overarching question. But I might ask a few specific guiding questions. I could ask, if you go down this branch, this kind of zigzag branch, and continue, I could ask, what develops down the zigzag? Down the zigzag path. And then maybe ask a couple more questions before we split up into groups. Can you get the fraction 17 over 29, which we found on the previous page just by adding kind of two randomly chosen fractions together in this way? Can you reach 17 over 29 in this picture? And where is it? Where and how? And can you reach it in more than one way? So, you know, if it happened to turn up in some region over here, here's 17/29 hiding out, is it possible that you actually managed to find it hiding over here as well? Could it be duplicated? And that's the kind of question that I'm interested in. And if 17 over 29 is causing you particular pain, you're free to change it to any other fraction you like. Like choose something simpler if you like in that case. Like if 17 over 29 is a problem, maybe you want to choose something simpler, like 2/3. 2/3 would be a good candidate. Okay. So those are the sort of questions that I'd like to address. I think now we could split up into breakout rooms for 5 minutes. Okay, that works for me, certainly. Great. Maybe just, yeah, to review this sheet. This is a little picture of the tree of numbers that I was able to develop. And the way that it worked is I started at the top with my two simplest fractions, 1 over 0 and 0 over 1. I put a vertical line between them, a branch, and then I made the funny addition between 1 over 0 and 0 over 1 to get 1 over 1. And it builds out a tree in this way. And if I wanted to put in some new entries to do it in action, I would start over on the left between 3 over 1 and 2 over 1. I add those in this funny way, and I would get 5 over 2. And that was in the way. I could take 3 over 1 and 5 over 2 and add them and get 8 over 3. Add 8 over 5 and 3 over 2 and get 13 over 5. And it's hard to resist stopping, but I'll stop. But there's a little bit more of the tree of numbers. And there are some just very interesting patterns to kind of observe as you look into this tree. And I had suggested specifically to look down this zigzag path and try to sort out what happens there. You can tell I ran out of space, but many people, I think, are running out of space on their page, but you can always start anew. If I had my 3 over 5 and my 5 over 8 and I wanted to see what happens next, I just have to put a bar between them and leave a little space for the output, and I would get 8 over 13. And if I wanted to go down another step in the zigzag, I would be getting 13 over 21, and I'd be running out of room again. So I might want to think about having a nice vertical column to have more room to work. But this is what's developing down the zigzag. And at some point, you may recognize what the numbers are that are showing up in the numerators and the denominators. I'd be interested to hear about that. And then if you have your favorite fraction in mind, for me, it's 17 over 29, I'm asking, is it possible to find it in this tree of numbers? And if you can find it, can you find it in more than one place? Or is it just in a unique location? So those were the sorts of questions that I had in mind about this tree of numbers. So if there are any questions about the mechanics, happy to address those. Or we just try our best in breakout rooms for another few minutes. for 5 minutes, I guess. So in the breakout room that I joined, I didn't catch the name, but somebody led our way to 17/29, and that.
Oh,
Yeah, I got it too.
Yeah. All right. Did it look like this path here?
Let's see.
we end up talking about Fibonacci numbers.
What?
I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but we were talking,
Yeah.
the math led to Fibonacci numbers with flowers and pine cones.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
Fibonacci numbers.
We didn't come up with the 1729, but it ended up going to that. And we end up explaining how that one works, or I learned that one a little bit of the Fibonacci's.
Well,
I think we
noticed.
misunderstood in our group. I'm sorry. We said 1724, and here you're saying 1729.
oops, that's my handwriting, isn't it?
Oh boy, that's what we're okay. So I guess we're out of the group.
It's just as good of a problem, though.
Yeah, we went 17. Okay.
You got it? 17/24?
No,
Oh, that's why we couldn't get it.
that's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was using the right hand column. We needed more time to do the left side hand column. But anyway.
We noticed that there is a reciprocal action going on.
Aha, between the left and the right?
Yes, but all branches have a reciprocal. They end up having a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, that's a big pattern that you spot, that there's this kind of mirror, this reciprocal mirror. And it goes deeper than that. You see other kind of reciprocation happening.
Oh, cool.
This is how our group found 17/29. And I heard about Fibonacci numbers. They came up in our group too.
Yeah, right there. Real quick, I think you kind of messed up one of the numbers on the.
Oh, which one?
Left. The letter L left.
Oh yeah.
3/1 should have been 3/2.
Trust a mathematician, huh? Okay. Yeah. Okay. That actually.
There you go.
And how did you know that was a mistake?
The reciprocal stuff.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you could do like
Right.
low-level thinking and like, okay, he just added wrong. But you know, you want this really pretty pattern to appear. It has to be the reciprocal, right? So that tells you a whole bunch of work on the left side was wrong, which is probably why my group didn't discover this. So that, let's make sure before we move on. Funky dory. So that should be 7/4, shouldn't it? Yeah. Very good. All right. So that's a way of detecting errors. You know.
But it was fun to work through once we found out what we were doing.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And everything to the left of the mirror is greater than
Can
or
I
equal to
add
1.
something?
Of course.
You could add a hexagon grid to that to keep it more organized. Because we were focusing on the lower left, as you had pointed out, and I see that you got the 17/29 in the upper right-hand corner, which wasn't emphasized. But I noticed all the patterns when I put them in or as another participant put a honeycomb pattern or hexagon grid.
Yeah, I don't claim to have the best organizational skills or have suggested the best organizational strategy, but that's part of the exercise and the fun, is figuring out better ways of thinking about what's given to you. I guess we've had another minute and a half. Our group got onto the zigzag and happened to discover the Fibonacci numbers as well in this really pretty way. So the sequence of numbers, where if you take 2 in the sequence and you add them, you get the next one in the sequence. And they're easy to discover. In fact, they were discovered about 500 years before Fibonacci. They were discovered by a Sanskrit poet named Pingal. I might be mixing him up with someone else, but these patterns were discovered in the syllable structures of Sanskrit poetry. And this was the way that this sequence and other mathematical sequences like binomial coefficients were discovered actually in the East in the setting of music theory. The last thing that I'll add is this, if you wanted to look further into this, what we're talking about is something called a Farey addition, F-A-R-E-Y, Farey fractions. And Farey was a geologist, a British geologist who lived in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And there are a lot of beautiful things to discover. So if you want to go online and Google Farey fractions or the Farey tree or the Farey tessellation, there's a lot of follow-up that you can do. But now I see it's 10 o'clock Mountain Time. So I'll thank you all for this activity together, and I'll stick around for a little bit and hope to meet many of you in person one day someplace.